Hello and welcome. Thank you everybody for joining today. I have a special guest that I will bring up in just a moment. This show today is going to be about the millennial mindset. You know, I've had some conversations with my daughter Jasmine, and she's pretty smart. And I thought it'd be really interesting to explore some of the stereotypes about millennials. I'm a Gen Xer. She's a millennial. We got a boomer in the house. Grandma is here. and so let me bring her up. Hey, Jasmine.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am doing great.
Wonderful. And if everyone can let me know how the sound is in the chat, that'd be awesome. I think everything should be okay. So, Jasmine, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? And then I've got some questions about different topics about the stereotypes of millennials.
Yes. My name is Jasmine. I'm 40 years old, born in 1985. So that puts me pretty smack in the middle of the millennial time frame. Which means, I was in 10 years old in 1996. And I was, a teenager in the 2000s. So now, having lived through, quite a lot of the technological advancements, but also still kind of being raised without, especially I found when you're under a certain socioeconomic level, like maybe some kids who were raised with more money had access to tech before certain people who had less money did. So there is, even within the millennials, like a little bit of a divide of how soon they were able to get access to certain technology, and how some of them or some of us have a greater, less technical, more historical upbringing of not being in tech and having to deal without because we didn't have access or means to it. But now I'm living in Santa Monica, California. I have my own bookkeeping business. I also invented a product that is a necklace that holds wine glasses. And I sell them online, and I also go to wine festivals and sell them. I have a wine festival coming up January 24th, and that's going to be the Uncorked Los Angeles Wine Festival at Union Station. And I won't have a booth there, but I'll be there, and I usually just sell them what I have on me and just enjoy the events. But I'm single, no children, which is also a kind of a stereotype that's happening amongst my peers right now as well. Not being married, not prioritizing children or having a partner. So I kind of fit that demographic, whereas a lot of my friends have multiple kids or have one kid. And I've noticed a lot of my counterparts, my friends, have opted to have one child opposed to the traditional household of 2.5 kids. Or so a lot of my friends kind of were like one and done, like we're going to do what we're supposed to do, meaning having a child, but realizing that it isn't as easy to take care of them as it was years ago. You can't just leave your kids with their parents, all the grandparents anymore, because their grandparents are still working. So it's definitely a different dynamic. It's much more difficult to have a family in this day and age. People aren't staying together as long as they were in prior generations, which is another reason why people aren't wanting to have multiple kids with multiple people. Access to travel, I think, has also become something that was never available to most generations prior to us. So now we're like, wait a minute, if we have a kid, we can't travel, and we've got a lot of things we want to see. So there's a lot of things that have come into play for my generation, and I'm only speaking from first person. I'm only speaking from my experience of how I've been raised, which are going to be not completely aligned with all millennials. There's many people that are my age that I went to school with who have completely different lifestyles than me, not even remotely close. But I do think that we all share a few common mindset traits that are unique to our generation: work ethics, other things, goals, dreams that align. We're more awake to certain things than our parents did because of information access. But also, like I said, I cannot say that I represent all people my age, because there are many people that I know who don't think the way that I do. And I don't want to just, put a blanket statement out that I represent all people my age.
Sure, no problem. And I think it's good to know that maybe not everybody fits the same stereotype. One stereotype doesn't fit all. So that's good. So let's get into the first topic, which is childhood and digital influence. So, how do you think that growing up in a digital environment has shaped your worldview compared to pre-digital generations like myself?
Well, one of the things that it's done, it has created just a wider knowledge of things that are out there. So before, it was kind of like whatever you saw on the news or in a movie, things that were passed down. If you had means to travel, you could travel. But for people who didn't necessarily come from an affluent background, or a family that had like an upper middle class, you were kind of stuck to your environment. And as soon as the computer became a desktop that all of a sudden we had in our homes, I mean, it started out with computer labs, at school. And it was like, oh, this is the future. We're going to teach our kids how to use computers. And so there was the classic Mac that you would see with like the bubble back that had like the colors, blues and whatever, kind of through Macs. And we all kind of started it with like basic, Oregon Trail, playing kind of games that were like teaching you how to learn about history or math, or but they made it into like a game, like learning. They needed to keep the kids interested in doing it and making it easy for them, but also still make it learning for it to be something the government would pay for a school. So we got access to this technology, which then started to, I think, open people in my generation's eyes to like outside environments, outside of our town, outside of our country, outside of what you just hear on the news. Like, you could then all of a sudden, instead of having to go to the library and get a book to learn about something outside of your community, you could then join a chat forum, or find a website that kind of gave you that information and also helped you socialize like outside of your community. So a lot of people like myself, for example, I was not very popular in school. I was bullied a lot. I didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't included in parties. I wasn't out socializing as much as a lot of the people in my school were. So instead of me basically losing out on getting to practice social skills and prepare myself to be out in the world, I was able to use AOL chat rooms, MSN chat rooms, Yahoo chat rooms to socialize and to meet people and to really boost my confidence. Because if I would have just had to succumb to my environment, I would have had very low self-esteem, very low confidence because of the people in my town. But because I was able to socialize with people across the world and in other cities, and they were like, no, you're cool, you're normal, don't listen to those kids, and it really was an empowering tool. But also you could get sucked down into a crazy wormhole of disappearing from your actual real community. That's when kind of the digital relationships started, because it used to be, you had to meet somebody to have a relationship with them, and then all of a sudden now you're talking every day to somebody in a different country that you're developing a relationship with, who you've never seen or met, who a lot of times back then weren't real, a lot of times now aren't real. And so we kind of started to hone our skills about, wait a minute, started to realize red flags about certain things when people try to gather information about you, and how to protect yourself on an online basis. That we kind of had to develop that skill kind of on our own and figure it out. It didn't exist, and that also allows us now to be a little bit more skeptical about things than I think the younger generation just accepts everything. They trust too easily what's being fed to them and online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that you're able to get that skepticism through that experience that was uncharted, And speaking of uncharted, I find it very interesting as well that you mentioned Oregon Trail, because that comes up a lot for Gen Xers. And I'm at the very beginning of Gen X, and we didn't have computers in school. I mean, they existed in school. I grew up in Silicon Valley, so friends of mine had computers that we would play. I'd go to their house after school and play on a computer, right? But not in the school setting. So when people talk about remembering Oregon Trail, that's the other end of Gen Xers. But for you, you're actually right at the beginning of millennials, and they have a special name for that, and that's Zennials.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So technically, I think you would actually fall into that Zennial, which is spelled with an X so you're half Gen X and half millennial in a sense, because you're at that cusp, and there's some overlay. And that would be one of those overlays that I actually didn't experience as a Gen Xer, but you did as a millennial. So what role do you think that nostalgia plays in your life today? Or does it? I mean, do you like things that are nostalgic, or do you ignore things that are nostalgic? And do you find it important to connect with past experiences?
I think that our generation is extremely nostalgic because things change so rapidly that we never get a chance to really absorb things that we enjoy, because then they're gone so quickly or have evolved so quickly that we lose things that were important to us. And because now there's a level of kind of everything being online, we didn't get to kind of capture the way that the kids now get to document their entire lives. We had to go and develop our pictures and had, disposable cameras. So I think we're in this unique position of we had to do things the long way. We had to, we experienced having to be home if someone was going to call you, and having someone in another room pick up the phone and listen to your conversation, and you had to like listen for a click. Hey, I'm on the phone. I can hear someone listening to what I'm saying. There was no.
You hear them breathing.
Yeah, or like you could just hear someone pick up the line, and you're like, hey. So there's these things that us as millennials got to experience that went away very quickly and shift very quickly. And one of the biggest nostalgic things I think for millennials that most people do not understand is because when we were kids.
Wait. You cut out just a second, so I didn't hear what the word was that you.
Disney.
Oh, Disney. Okay.
So Disney is the one nostalgic kind of universal thing for millennials that most people do not comprehend our nostalgia for. Because you'll see, I get criticized constantly by people older than me, younger than me. Why do you care about Disneyland? Why do you go to Disneyland? Why do you, like anything of Disney? You're an adult. That's weird. And what they don't understand, that us millennials are like, we don't care if you understand it or not, is that we were all raised by Disney. We didn't have unlimited YouTube videos to watch, and cable came into play if you were rich. If you had money, you could watch maybe a few extra cartoons channels, and you got Nickelodeon that came into play, and you got other things that came into play. But for the most part, Disney was what we all were sat in front of. Like whatever the kids these days are to YouTube or to TikTok, that was Disney for us. We were babysat by Disney, and that sometimes was the only thing that we had access to, and we'd watch the movies over and over and over again because it was that or nothing. It was that or play outside. And so I think that a lot of older generations and younger generations can't comprehend the nostalgia and the connection that my generation has to Disney. Like, why are you guys spending thousands of dollars on annual passes and merch, and why do you guys have all these like Disney things in your house? And I think that's probably across the board. Like, I always will end up seeing one of my friends from high school posting that they're at Disneyland. Like, we all still go, and we all try to bring our kids into that environment. And it's funny because our kids, because I take my niece and I take my friends' kids a lot to Disneyland at like young ages, they don't care about Disneyland. They're not into it like we are. We're more into being there than the kids are into being there, because the generation now has so many other platforms to watch from and so much content that Disney isn't the only thing. And so there's anime, or there's like all these other things that are more interesting to them. My niece is extremely into K-pop and anime. I'm like, huh? So I think Disney's even becoming less popular with the younger generation because there's so many different choices, whereas with us, that's all we had. It was Disney or bust. It was Disney or go ride your bike. So same thing with the comics. There wasn't anything that we could just watch endlessly online. It was like, we had comics. So that's why we love Marvel, DC. We're obsessed with these superhero movies because that was our, like, what we had available to us. We didn't have, Netflix and endless creators on different streaming platforms. We had comics and we had Disney. So when bought all the comics, it was like a perfect marriage for people in my generation. We're like, oh yes, this is great, and we're obsessed with it, and our nostalgia is there. But I think also, like I said, as far as the other things being nostalgic, like we still like to have like physical pictures, right? We still want to print out pictures, put them in a frame, or just even have them to look at, because that was such a short-lived experience. That's what we, we all got to print out pictures and had them hanging from our walls everywhere. But now, it's not really even available. It's hard to even find a place to print out things for. So I think we lost things that we enjoyed so quickly, and things evolved so quickly that's where the nostalgia comes from, is the constant change and not really being able to get tired of something or get sick of something.
Mumsy says, Mickey, Snow White, not Avatar.
Mickey and Snow White, not Avatar. Yeah. The Avatar and stuff, that all came much later, and I'm not into it personally. I think it's basically taking Disney and, I actually had a conversation with my hairstylist, who's around my age, a little bit older, and me and him have the similar generational history. And I said, isn't Avatar just Fern Gully? And he was like, yes. And nobody gets that reference unless you're a millennial, because nobody knows what Fern Gully is, because you were sitting in front of your Disney TV, video cassettes, playing all the Disney that was available to you, which was a lot. You would never know what that is. And so we hate Avatar because it's just copying Pocahontas and Fern Gully, but in James Cameron's, oh, look at me, I invented. No, you didn't. That's Fern Gully. What are you doing? So, but you can't say that, because then people are like, what? So we are in that weird, like, section of history where the older people don't know what we're talking about, the younger people don't know what we're talking about, because we lived in this, like I said, a very specific time where things disappeared quickly. So it wasn't, everything was trend, flash in the pan, and unless you were in it, you wouldn't even know it happened, because it didn't have any staying power. Like something from your generation might have, like, oh, the Brady Bunch had, however many seasons, and everybody watched it because that was the only thing that was on, versus like there was shows that would air for one season and go away, and you're like, I love that show, where did it go? And so we lost things very quickly, which I think also lends itself to our my generation's, like, kind of abandonment issues and disconnection to things. We accept loss, I think, a lot better than other generations, because we're so used to having things just ripped from us.
Wow. Well, good thoughts there. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. So let's move on to work ethic and career perspectives. So first, how do you perceive the work ethic stereotype that millennials have faced, especially in comparison to Gen Z? So we were called slackers. Gen X was called slackers. And then millennials are being called slackers, or have been. And then Gen Z is a whole new level. And I think some people confuse Gen Z with millennials.
Yes, I think that's probably the biggest issue. So I think what happened was we were raised in this weird time of, like, being exposed because of having a wider television access to different shows. Like, for example, there'd be shows on like the History Channel or Discovery Channel that would be like documentaries about jobs you didn't even know existed. And you were like, wait, I could make pottery for a living? Like, so there was this thing of, I think our generation was exposed to a huge awakening of just different possibilities, which then made us seem like slackers because we didn't know what we wanted to do. Everybody before us was like, you're going to work at the grocery store, you're going to be a mechanic, you're going to run the family business, you're going to go to college, you know, but my generation was like, wait a minute, my parents are still in debt from college and they didn't even use their, you know, degree. And so college, the desire for that certificate started to decline with my generation because we started to see like, wait, why? Like this, there's this cool, you know, I can post reviews about travel and make money. So there was all of a sudden this new way to like monetize your hobby, which started to create, and I think your generation started the movement of like personal growth, right? And so the personal growth, you know, self-help movement started to bleed into our generation of like our parents and our mentors who are your age telling us, hey, don't do what we did and just listen to your parents and like, you know, work at the local whatever, do what you love. So then all of us are like, well, what the hell do we love? And so we had this crisis of like, well, we'll work here for now because we need money. And so we became slackers because we were doing things that we didn't love and we knew it. And we knew that we had to do something that we did love. So we would split our time and our focus on finding what we loved, because that was the hardest thing, was like, what do we love and how can we monetize it? So I was personally constantly trying to figure out like, how can I generate a living and a career from something that makes me feel like I'm not at work, because we saw our parents hating their lives, like coming home with money and resenting it and it not being worth it and just going in because they had to. And it was terrifying. We're like, oh my God, we cannot do what they did. And like, pensions were no longer a thing. Insurance started to go away and become more expensive. It wasn't just like, oh, get a job so you could have a pension and get a job so you could have insurance. There was like, jobs weren't even offering that. So now we're like, even the reasons that our parents are telling us to have a job for retirement, for this, don't even apply anymore. So like, that advice is no good. So we had to improvise. And so we look like slackers because for the like our 20s, we're like, well, what do we love? What do we want to do? And how can we monetize it? So we're hacking. We're constantly moving between jobs because we're trying to find what we love. We're gaining experience. We're gaining knowledge. And one of the ways you can find out what you love is by process of elimination. Finding out what you don't love. Finding out where you don't fit. And so by us seeming like unmotivated is because we were trying to find that motivation. And then I think now, and I can say this about most of the people, at least that run in my circle, that usually tend to be a little bit older, but not by too much, like 5 years or so older. So they're in the little bit older range. But even people who are my age and younger, now we spent our 30s honing in on finding that passion. We're like, oh, I know I can't work in an office, but I can work, you know, in this trade. And then they started building that skill set, or going back to school, which they didn't want to waste all that money and all that time without knowing what they wanted to do. So now that they do, I know a lot of people my age who went back to school or started school once they realized, oh no, I want to be a teacher, but I'm going to get my credentials in this field because I wasn't just going to go to school just to go to school. So I know people who are graduating with their masters and bachelors and everything, you know, in their late 30s, and that wasn't a thing before us. But we all seemed lazy because we were refusing to commit to something that we weren't passionate about. And then we didn't find our passions until the environment kind of settled around us, where we were like, oh, okay, so we can confidently make money doing this. The metrics are out there, the data's out there to say, yes, you can make money doing this, and here's how. Whereas before, there was no roadmap on how to monetize your dreams. And the kids these days have the exact opposite situation, where they see us now, after doing the work to say live your dreams, they're just dreaming. They're not even trying anything to find. They're just like, no, I'm going to be a pop star. No, I'm going to be a TikTok star. And they just, nobody wants to work anymore to build that character like that we had to do. And so one of the things that like me and my friends see with the customer service experience now, or the retail experience now, which used to be kids when we were that age working there and working our asses off and making sure that the customer service experience was great. Now the kids who are there don't want to be there, don't care, want more money for doing nothing. And we're just like, wait a minute, like I made $7 an hour working like at fast food, and now you want 20? Are you out of your mind? It took me, 20 years to make $20 an hour. And these kids these days are just like, nope, we're not coming in unless you pay us 20. And then we're like, shit, well, the workforce, we don't have one unless we submit to these little terrorist demands. So, but also the cost of living has quadrupled. So you can't really get too mad at them for, demanding that, because they want to have a nice lifestyle. And my generation suffered to be able to accomplish that lifestyle that they want right out of high school. And then on one hand, we sympathize because we're like, shit, that would have been great to have this lifestyle right out of college. And who am I to like smash these kids' dreams? Because, we get it. That would have been great. But also knowing that they're soft because they didn't have the punishment that we had to go through to build the character that we have with the experiences that we have, to have the work ethic. And I saw this one like hilarious like reel on this influencer's profile about millennials, saying millennials, we would go to a rave and then the rave would end at 3. We'd still have glitter on our face and a wristband, and we would like get 2 hours of sleep and show up to work hungover and just be there and work. And the kids these days are like, my aura isn't aligned today, so my spirit guide said I should not come in. And it's just like, what? So it is like very, very different. And hiring these people that are younger, like myself, now being a business owner, trying to hire people at a low wage, which is how people got rich, on the back of us making our lower wages because we didn't want to commit to like a full-time career. Now kids want to work from home part-time, make as much money as I'm making, and I'm the business owner taking all the risks. So it is crazy to see the entitlement that has come out of the younger generation. And it's even crazier to see the older generations calling millennials entitled, when we literally had to fight for every entitlement that we have.
Wow. Well, you said it all. So I'm going to move to the next question. Great. Wait, before I do, I will mention that, like you said, very unusual. In my 30s, I went back to college, which most Gen Xers, if they were going to college, they went right out of high school, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And but what happened is after I divorced your father, I ended up well, actually, before we divorced, I started working for a local newspaper, and I discovered that journalism was like that hobby that that I should maybe make a career out of this, and so that's why I decided to go back them, because I looked at, oh, well, what if I want to be a foreign correspondent, or I want to get work for CNN or something like this. You had to have a bachelor's degree. That was a minimum requirement.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I decided to go back to college. I mean, there were other factors too, but that was like I was looking at colleges in California,
Mm-hmm.
but then other factors made me choose to go to Southern Utah University. But yeah, so I was in my 30s when I went and graduated. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the college system has completely deteriorated and devalued itself
Mm.
based on its making it so difficult. The difficulty level used to be a sign of an accomplishment, but now the difficulty level of it has become such an obstacle that's like an inability to overcome it. The price for college, the living in different states and abroad, whatever, being far from home, people can't afford rent these days and stuff. They're still living with their parents now, and even people who, if they wanted to do what you did and decide, okay, well, I want to get a bachelor's now, and they have to go to school full time. They have kids, they have bills. Like, how are you supposed to spend $100,000 to get your bachelor's when you can't even work because you have to do school full time? So I think that when colleges did that to make themselves just an unattainable goal for people, then they made themselves unvaluable anymore. Unless you're a doctor, a lawyer, or someone that has to be credentialed,
Mm-hmm.
just a bachelor's degree is worthless these days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally understand. So, do you prefer working for a traditional company, or freelancing, or a mix of both? You've kind of skirted around that, that finding a way to do what you love. Um, so, where does that fit in? A traditional company, freelancing, or a mix of both?
Well, this is where my personal experience and my lifestyle divides from the rest of my generation, because I would say there's probably like a 30-70 split, where a lot of people from my hometown, which was a small town, who are in my generation, are happy to work for a traditional company, who like the security, who want to have their weekends, and they don't really want their lives to change too much. They like to have that steady paycheck. They're still on the traditional steady paycheck mindset, right? And they're more concerned with climbing up their corporate ladder, maybe creating a different position for themselves that didn't exist before, that they can monetize, but doing it within a company, so that they don't have to have the responsibility of taxes and payroll and compliance and things like that come along with going out on your own. Me personally, I never did well in corporate settings. I was always fired. I never lasted long. I just don't comply. I'm not a person that gets the workbook and wears the uniform the way it should be worn. I will, if you have to tuck in your shirt, I'll untuck it. You know, if you have to show up and clock in at 9 o'clock, I'll show up at 9:05. Like I could never integrate into a corporate environment, which is why there was really no other option for me but to start my own business. And I started it by freelancing. So the last kind of paycheck where I was on payroll for somebody was in my late 20s, early 30s, and I was working as a personal assistant, and that was as close to a job as I could get because I still had my own, you know, autonomy, and I could kind of show up and do things on, you know, while I was at work, and it didn't feel like, you know, I didn't have coworkers to, you know, navigate around, and multiple managers to account, you know, to be accountable to. I could make my own schedule. I still had to obviously do things within my boss's time frame, but you know, you're reporting to one person. You're a personal assistant. Your boss is the person who's paying your paycheck. They're writing you the check. So it wasn't like I had to beg for, you know, things up a corporate ladder. You know, I could go directly to the person writing my paycheck. So that was as close to successful as I could get with my personality, to where I could, you know, sustain a job without getting fired. Because anything that I had to do where I had to go into an office or a location that was, you know, a static location, I would get fired. So I thrived in the personal assistant role, but then realized, as I did with most of the jobs, that with anything, when you're making other people money, which means you're doing the work to make somebody else rich, you're never going to be rich. And one of my personal goals, which not all my colleagues and people in my generation share, which is I always wanted to be wealthy. I wanted to be rich. I wanted to have the things. And it was never going to happen while I was making somebody else rich. So I realized that very early on. Well, not early on enough, unfortunately, but I realized that around 2016, and that is when I started my side business, which was my wine glass necklaces, and I started selling those. And I was like, okay, now I'm generating my own income for myself. I'm making the product. I'm doing the research. I'm shooting the content. I'm doing everything on my own. So then now, instead of just sitting home on the weekends or, you know, watching football or whatever, you know, being bored, I now had a purpose and a calling, and I would wake up early all of a sudden, and I would sleep till noon my whole life. And as soon as I started my business, I would be up at like 8 or 9, which was like a big deal, because normally I would sleep till noon, you know, 10, 11, 12. And I now had a reason to get up in the morning, and I understood what people were saying for years and years and years. Do something that you'll love and you'll never work a day in your life. And, you know, people were just giving me their money for the thing that I created. And I was like, wow, this is so much better than me slaving for a paycheck and exchanging time for money. So once you break out of the mindset of being scared of not having a steady paycheck, then your mind just unlocks possibilities, and your work ethic triples, because you know the only way you'll make money is if you show up and you deliver something that people want to give you money for, whether it is your time or your services or your product. Whereas if you're just showing up to a job, you think you're secure, but really you're performing to not get fired. So your life is in someone else's hands, like indefinitely. If that person mismanages their company and they go out of business, you're subject to that person's failure, and essentially they'll get to you. And if you have a crisis at home that you need to deal with or whatever, and you're working for someone, they can say, you know what, you're fired, you didn't come, you were late or whatever. So I had been fired so many times that I knew I could never place my future in someone else's hands. And I think that a lot of like friends of mine, people that I know who have their own businesses, feel the same way, which is it's actually a safer bet to bet on yourself and know that you'll show up and do what it takes than to leave your future in the hands of some corporation that doesn't care about you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, this is a good transition to the next question or the next topic, which is money matters. So, like, what's your approach to making money, spending money, saving money, investing money? Because one of the stereotypes is that millennials have a debt problem. And so what's your experience with debt and how do you manage it?
It's very true. Millennials have a debt problem. I don't consider debt to be a problem. I think that debt is healthy, but I'm a business owner and I'm in finance, so I understand debt. So I'm not scared of it. I was scared of it when I was in my 20s because it buried me, and I had to have, at one point, grandma, who's on the chat, had to bail me out of a really bad situation where I had creditors and other people banging down my door because I had lost my job, of course, and I wasn't able to make minimum payments and things like that. And so I became a slave to debt until she paid it off. And then I got scared of debt because I was like, well, I can't just have someone save me from this debt every time, type of a thing. But then I started to change my mindset around debt because I was not able to do anything that I wanted to do. So if I was to just live my life purely on a cash basis, then I would miss out on pretty much anything that I wanted to do. I wouldn't be able to experience anything because we just weren't making enough money to save for things that we wanted to do. So I personally just changed my mindset to spend the money now in a credit card, because we had access to lines of credits, credit cards, things that used to be very scary. But when they're under the business, they're not on your personal credit. So I personally opened up my business and I utilized my EIN and I put all my debt on my business. And then my business holds the debt. So my personal credit's not affected by any of my bad spending choices. However, the interest can be a lot, and it is a challenge to eliminate your debt and pay things off monthly or whatever. But one of the things that I personally believe, which I don't necessarily advise other people to practice, but I just consider interest as a fun tax. So if I want to take that trip and I'm going to have to pay a few $100 in interest because I might not be able to pay that card off right away, but I will be able to take that trip that I want, that's really important to me, that will, expand my growth, that will, put me in a better mood to get back to work. There's the cost benefit analysis is performed, and you go, you know what? Fun tax. So I think of debt now as you're just paying a fun tax, and I don't get scared of interest And I also don't make minimum payments. I make, large payments, but I'm not paying off, debt like every month and whatever. But it does also motivate me to make more money always. I'm constantly never saving. I'm always making more money. I'm always maximizing my income, not eliminating spending. And I think a lot of my generation feels the same because we had to go without so many things. We invented FOMO, fear of missing out. And we now, as adult professionals who are making very good money, don't feel like just because the economy is not aligned with what we're making to allow us to come pay for these things in cash, that we should be without them. We're making good money. If we can't pay for it in cash, then we'll pay for it down the road. Because just because the economy keeps, pricing us out of doing everything we love, even though we're doing everything right, we're not gonna go without anymore.
So that brings us to the next question. Do you prioritize experiences over material possessions? And can you share an example?
No, we prioritize both equally. So I would say, for example, we like to have designer bags, or we like to have brand name makeup, or things like that. We like to, I guess our mentality is we work too hard. We work too hard because we do. I personally work 60 to 70 hour weeks. And my philosophy is I work too hard to be in the, 99-cent store, type of lifestyle. Right. So it is important to me to have high quality items, but also high quality items, material things are a lot cheaper than they used to be. Whereas experiences have gone up in price. So we do value experiences highly, but also we value material things as well equally, because we see how those material things can set you apart. There's sometimes, I know myself personally, I used to never care about bags. Having a designer bag was never a priority to me. But then once I got my first designer bag, you'd be surprised at how it opens a door into a different world that you weren't exposed to before. And then once you see what's possible, it motivates you to work a lot harder, to make more, to grow. So I think that having material things aren't a absolute requirement for us, but they are just as important as experiences, because what's the point of going on a trip to Paris when you can't afford to buy anything when you're there? So it's not just about an experience. It's about having the things that are there for you when you're in the experiencing, bringing something back with you that is a kind of treasure of that experience.
Okay. So moving on to housing and living arrangements. So are you leaning more toward renting or buying? And what influences your decisions in today's housing market?
Well, we're the first generation that has been basically completely priced out of the housing market. We never made enough money because we were always figuring it out in our 20s. Some people who took the, quote unquote, stayed at home in their hometown and worked a good job, got a trade, those people A lot of people from my hometown have houses. A lot of them have houses. So I think that if anybody in my generation that didn't leave their hometown, that is in a cheaper area, that took the trade route and work at a decent paying steady job, have houses. Absolutely. They own homes.
Do you think they were able to actually get into a house on their own, or they had parents like helping them get into it?
A lot of them were able to get in on their own because they would get married and they would pull their finances together. So, and a lot of people that I know their parents didn't necessarily have, money to help them. Maybe they like assisted with the down payment or something, but like as a marriage gift, but there was no, a lot of the people I know, they don't have like a huge amount of support from their parents other than, just general, help with the children. That's typically like the most help that my generation gets from their parents. Whereas, before that, it was like, your parents bought you a home. Your generation, I'm sure most of the people that their home was purchased by their parents for them, in advance, knowing like, oh, my daughter or my son or whatever is going to need a home. Because a lot of people that I know who are in your generation, that own homes is because like either their parents died and left it to them, or they were bought, because they were so cheap that their parents had multiple homes, and whether they're renting them out or whatever, property was cheap. Now property, not only just property inflation, but the price of a loan. If we're talking about debt, like credit card debt's one thing, but home loans, car loans, those are not good debt. As a finance professional, I will never buy a car. I will never buy a car. You will end up paying double for your car if you buy it on financing.
So and you lease?
I lease. Absolutely. I write off my lease 100% for my business. I get a new car every 3 years. If you were to buy a car, you would be stuck in that car for 5 to 10 years, depending on your term. And then by the time you paid it off, it will be worthless. And you will not be able to drive. You will need a new car. And guess what? Now you're paying interest again. So you'll never stop paying interest, and you'll never stop making payments, and you'll always overpay for the car, because that $30,000 car that you bought, you ended up paying $10,000 to $15,000 in interest. So you paid $45,000 for a car that's now worth $5,000, and you're going to need a new one. So it makes absolutely no sense to buy a car on a financing term. But leasing, you don't pay interest, you just pay the payment, and you get a new one every 3 years. And you're like, oh, well, I'm making a payment forever then. You're making a payment forever. Right. And your car is worthless now. And I get a new one every 3 years. Right. So it's like people's mindset is when it's stuck in the past. Maybe when cars were made to last, then it made sense to buy a car that you would have for 20 or 30 years. But now cars are so expensive and they don't last that it does not make sense to buy a car. But people will still buy them going, oh, I own my car. You don't. The bank does. So I think that ownership has a different meaning to people in my generation, versus like, if someone says, oh, I bought my car in cash. Well, yeah, you bought your car. You own the car. But if someone's like making a payment on it, no, that's a no for me. And same thing with home ownership. It's like you end up never actually owning your home because you're just constantly making payments. And I think people like myself don't want to own a home just for owning a home's sake. That it only makes sense to own a home when you can afford to buy it outright, or buy it to the point where you could monetize it, meaning, make it into a rental property, or, something like that, to where you're not actually living in it and just paying a mortgage. Because a lot of people will say, well, oh, well, you're paying rent and you don't own it. But it's like, yeah, but I'm paying a lot less. I live in a highly desirable part of the country that you could never afford. And I don't have to maintain my property. I don't have to pay property taxes. I don't have to repair and maintenance any of the things of the building that I live in. And I might not like own it, but I also don't have it to be taken away from me either. If I don't, if I come into a situation where something happens and I can't make my property tax payment, I'm not going to be in trouble because I'll just move to a different place that's cheaper because I'm renting. So it's actually a safer bet if you are on more of a budget to rent than to own, because if your life isn't completely stable, and whose is, owning something that you're going to lose if you miss a payment or two, and a lot of people have done that, like, oh, I own a home. No, you don't. You don't. The bank owns the home. Yeah. So for me, home ownership only makes sense if you're doing it to monetize it. If you're renting it out, to live in a house that you're paying that much for that you can't write off, like, doesn't make sense.
So another stereotype is minimalism. That millennials are very into minimalism and gray and no colors. And I mean, does this play a role in your living arrangement?
I've never heard of that in my life.
Okay.
That's absolutely false. 100%.
You know what, when I say minimalism, though, you're just saying you haven't heard of any millennials that are minimal?
Millennial that isn't a borderline hoarder.
Wow.
That doesn't wear color like crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, I mean, sure, we all love our black, like black is forgiving on anyone in any generation, but beiges and grays, no. Millennials were in the 90s when it was color pop, when it was 80s, we're 80s babies, we're around neon, and we all had the Lisa Frank coloring books, and absolutely we all painted our rooms pink and purple and red, and like, I don't know a millennial that doesn't move into a new apartment and paint their walls. I'm like, you don't own this place, and they're like, I don't care. So I don't think that that's a true stereotype. Maybe with men, if you're going to talk about men, I do experience men being on the minimalist side, because I think the men are more focused on making money, and they know that having too much stuff around them is just going to distract them. So I think that might apply, if at all, to men, because men just don't care. They're about their cars. Men are more high value, high ticket items than stuff around the house. So a man will spend all their money and time getting a nice car that they can take a girl out, they can roll around in, that they can show off with. They'll prioritize like watches, and they'll have 5 or 6 really nice pairs of shoes, and they won't have just unlimited sneakers or whatever. They'll rather prioritize high quality, high ticket, expensive items. So I will say that the men probably would be more to that stereotype, but the women, absolutely not. The men are full of color. We're like purple lipstick. We're like trying all the colors, all the things. We have, unlimited color palettes when it comes to trying things. We're always dressing up. We're always, having almost too much things, because we have Amazon, we have Fashion Nova, we have all these different things at our fingertips that nobody used to have to, have a closet full of stuff and that was it. Now we have storage for all the stuff that we have. So I absolutely do not think that is true.
Okay. You mentioned clothes and shoes and stuff. I want to Jim, this is a question I have somewhere later, but I want to go ahead and ask it now. When you were growing up, do you remember leggings?
Leggings?
Yeah.
Leggings?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it seems that like maybe sometime after I moved to Cambodia that it changed from leggings to yoga pants, because I remember yoga pants were big baggy, kind of like MC Hammer type big baggy pants. Those were yoga pants. And somewhere it changed that now yoga pants are leggings.
Pants. Oh my God.
Huh?
I don't know how anybody can do yoga in MC Hammer pants.
So like when did that change?
I think you're completely misinformed in your terms, because like those parachute pants that you're talking about, those were fashion. Those were never for yoga. And I think the misconception is leggings are fashion and yoga pants are utilitarian. So when you have a pair of leggings, they might have leopard print, they might have, they're basically what you guys probably would have, like tights, right? So like you guys had tights, which was like pantyhose, because you want to wear a dress or you want to wear like a long shirt or something, but you don't want to have your legs exposed, it's cold or whatever. So the leggings are more like a substitute for like pants or pantyhose, whereas the yoga pants are part of what my generation has as athleisure wear. So it is a category of fashion, whereas leggings are a standalone. Like a legging would be like, oh, I'm going to wear these sparkly tights with this dress or with this long shirt. That would be like a legging. Whereas a yoga pant is a category of athleisure wear, which is people who are signaling that they're fit, that they work out, that they're rushing between a Pilates class and the grocery store. It's a look, it's a vibe, it's a signal to say, hey, I'm athletic. That's the yoga pant is. A yoga pant will it's like, explain why I call them yoga pants if you aren't doing yoga. Because they're made for yoga. That's why they're called yoga pants, is because in order for you to do yoga, you're doing extremely difficult poses that you cannot be in loose pants for, which is why I'm like, excuse me, with the MC Hammer pants being called, no, those parachute pants were never called yoga pants.
Well, and just to clarify, not actually MC Hammer pants, because those kind of had like, I don't know, those were like a fashion thing. Whereas this is more, what I'm talking about is more of a hippie culture, kind of like out of India.
Yeah, that's not the same thing. Because it's like I said, it's athleisure wear, and yoga is only a term for athletic ability, athletic, Pilates pants, gym pants. You could call them, like, when you're going to be working out, a lot of people like running pants, it's just, it's athleisure wear is the proper term for it. And you would pair it with, a tank top and like a vest, or, and it becomes like a fashion signal that you're an athletic person, you work out. And that's what you're signaling, versus leggings where you're like, I'm too fat to wear jeans.
Great note to end on that part. I mean, end this topic. And by the way, thank you, Robert, for that question. So our next topic, we did kind of hit on kids already, but we didn't really talk about why. Why, so you mentioned that millennials are either having one child or no child. You were talking about in relation to maybe finances. Is that the only reason, or is there another reason why?
Finances are the primary reason. Because raising a child now, you have to consider healthcare, which has skyrocketed. You have to consider daycare and private school, which has skyrocketed. Activities for the kids to go into, which has skyrocketed. My friends who decided to have kids are struggling. They're the ones who are struggling the most financially. And I think the people like me who see the people who ended up choosing that road and having kids, how much they're struggling and how they have to go without and how they can't just get on a plane and take a trip or say yes to a concert at the last minute. Like, the spontaneity has gone completely out of their lives. They don't have any help anymore because their parents are not helping them. They're not helping them financially, and they're not helping them, with babysitting and other things. And there's also, I think, the increase in divorce rates have skyrocketed, which make people not want to have a kid with somebody they're going to end up hating. Because the dating culture has changed so much that it's very likely that you're not going to stay with the person that you marry for very long. And to be saddled to that person with a child who, now men aren't really showing up to take care of the kids in the situation of a divorce. So women are like, well, if I get divorced from this guy, he's not going to take care of this kid. And the culture shift of that has made women extremely cautious of procreating because they know the consequence for the rest of their lives of that decision. Whereas before, it used to be like, oh, I'll just pop out some kids. My mom will help me raise them. They'll stay at their grandma's. They'll do this. So we'll just have a great, like, it was just this, like, we'll figure it out kind of a mentality. And we're looking around going, nobody's figuring it out. And what's wrong with public schools?
Mm-hmm.
Not being a parent, I cannot 100% explain from personal experience what's wrong, but from my friends, public schools have locked the parents out of the education for their kids. So you either take the state curriculum of whatever they decide history is or whatever they decided is important that your kid know, and the people who are in the schools teaching, you're not in control of any of it. You're basically sending off your kid to the state going, they'll be fine. It's not what it used to be. People don't become teachers these days for the same reasons as they did in prior generations. The people who are becoming teachers now, because there's so little money in it and so much scrutiny, people who actually are choosing that as a profession tend to have ulterior motives. And yeah, so what she say, I have 4 kids, 3 are all in their 20s and 1 is 10, all went to public schools, not where I live. Yeah, like, because a lot of people are like, my public school is so bad that they're going to send them three towns over. So you can't control the funding that a public school will get and the programs that are available. A lot of public schools don't have music programs, don't have good sports programs, don't have good things. And I will say this, I just took my niece to Disneyland a couple weeks ago for Christmas. I was shocked what she showed me about her school. She goes to public school. There's an entire social media channel dedicated to fights. And all of it is people fighting in bathrooms, fighting in quads, just basically just swinging on each other. No supervision, nobody's getting involved. And it's like this like MMA world of, you know, junior high kids just wailing on each other, beating each other, and everyone just filming it and putting it online, and there's no parents or teachers, or, you know, there's the funding to schools is so abysmal that the kids are just running the schools, and there's no control over the kids in these schools. And it's, I personally I would never have a child in public school. I would only like either homeschool or have like some kind of a public like charter. And those are very hard to come by.
Yeah.
That's a huge influence in choosing to have kids, is knowing that unless you're going to be a stay-at-home mom, which is becoming more and more rare, you're basically having a kid to send them off to be raised by the community, and people don't trust their communities like they used to.
Yeah. All right. That's horrific, actually, you know, and then it makes me think of, I watch a lot of true crime, and it makes, it's so sad. Okay, so let's move on to food and lifestyle choices. How do you feel about the stereotypes surrounding millennials and their food choices? And the biggest, most famous epitome of millennial food is avocado toast.
Well, like I had said before we got on this call, I don't know that that's actually a stereotype.
Do you eat avocado toast?
No.
Okay. Do your friends?
Not eat avocado toast. My friends do not eat avocado toast. No. I don't know where that stereotype came from. But we are the healthiest generation. We believe in biohacking. We believe in taking care of our
biohacking?
Biohacking.
I've never even heard of that.
Well, biohacking is when you hack, you basically accelerate your healing, accelerate your longevity, you know, extend your longevity, and you slow down your aging process by incorporating positive things into your body, like supplements, like fasting. Like, so basically one of the things that we have information about now that your generations before didn't have is what hurts us and what doesn't. What our DNA, we can send a prick of our finger and send our DNA off to a lab, and they'll tell you, don't eat bananas, make sure you're, you know, so we have the ability to hack our biology and plug in the best possible things. So I told my 10-year-old she's not growing up to be a vegan. I don't believe in veganism per se, only because it's the most difficult dietary platform to stay the healthiest on, because it's so processed. So I don't believe in processed foods, and veganism relies almost exclusively on processed food and fake food. And unless you're a vegan that is strictly greens and fruits, I don't think that that's very healthy. If you're eating chips because they don't have meat in them. You know, I had one of my friends back in the day used to say, because I had a friend who was vegan and she was overweight. And my other friend used to say, yeah, you know who else is a vegan? Hippos.
Oh, snarky.
Because just because you're eating a bunch of bread because you don't want to eat a cow doesn't make you healthier. You know, so if you're doing veganism wrong, then it's just as bad as doing anything else. But I do personally believe in organic, farm raised, healthy. If I'm going to kill an animal, I want it to have a good life. And I don't eat fast food unless, you know, it's absolutely necessary. You're on the road, you know, or something where you absolutely have to. Or if you're hungover and you need it. But if you're making choices at the grocery store, I will spend the money and I will get grass finished, grass fed, free range, and that's a priority for me. And it sucks because it never had to be. My generation is the first one that like had to figure out ingredients. Like the toxic, disgusting FDA and food supply in this country is something that us people, you know, us millennials who are biohacking are very conscious of. And I know that, you know, we weren't going to bring politics into this, but I personally voted for Trump because I wanted to get Robert F. Kennedy Jr. into the White House to stop the FDA. That was I was just going to vote for him. But when he got onto the ticket for Trump, that was why I voted, because I wanted somebody in the White House who was going to stop the FDA, or at least attempt to, and the pharma, big pharma. So we as millennials see the poison that, you know, is coming into our food supply and into our environment, and we're biohacking to eliminate it from killing us, because we see people who are getting cancer at alarming rates, who are getting autism, or kids are being born with allergies that didn't exist, you know, when we were growing up, and it's not from nothing. So when we eat our avocado toast, you know, when we're eating, you know, healthy is all that really represents, it's because we see the possibility of living a functional old age, because there's so many people who are living an unhealthy old age, who are deteriorating, you know, at 20 years older than us, look like they're in their 80s. You know, you're like, whoa. So we're prioritizing healthy foods as much as we can. We're prioritizing exercise, drinking water, eliminating processed things, and implementing supplements and other things. So that's when you hear them talk about avocado toast, it's just a uneducated way of saying we're healthier than you.
So Robert says, you would hate my house. That's some of what we eat. Fast food, processed foods. I hate orange Mussolini, I call, or like Trump, you know, orange Mussolini, okay. And then RFK Jr. brainworm.
Yeah,
I'm
sure you're very healthy. I hope you live a long life and don't die from myocarditism from your vaccine.
Yeah. So actually, I'd like to mention that again, like with going to college in my 30s was unusual. I was also very much into what we called health food and alternative medicine. I don't know how much of your childhood you remember that, but
I've always given you credit where it's due and blame where it's due. But credit was always due. I remember you always having gross food in the house that nobody wanted to eat. I'm like, why is this granola here? Who's doing this to us? Like, what? Like, we're kids. Like, let us eat McDonald's, you know? Yeah. And I do see a growing trend of my age, like friends that are my age, not letting their kids eat chocolate or candy until they're in school and they can't stop them.
Yeah. But then but you know what I've discovered is you can't control everybody. They go to play at a neighbor's house. They go to the grandparents, oh, here's a little candy bar or something. I wanted your bodies to be able to grow with a good immune system.
Robert says he is an anti-vaxxer, so there's hope for him yet.
Yeah. Yeah. And in fact, it was before the internet that I had to do research about vaccines. And it was because you're my oldest of three, and you had what was called febrile seizures, which febrile meaning fever, and seizures. You went into like the seizures.
I did not know that.
Oh, your eyes rolled back in your head, and you were just like you were in a seizure.
I did not know that.
Oh, you didn't know this? Yes, and you were a baby, right? And it happened twice, and the doctors didn't know. They said we don't know why. There might be some kind of threshold that that you're susceptible to. That like so when you reach 100, you go into a seizure or something. But it was actually at a higher temperature, so the threshold theory didn't fit, and so that's when I started investigating and researching old school with books,
Yep.
and I discovered the link between, that vaccination. Well, and let me say the concept of being vaccinated in general terms is no different than the chickenpox parties, which,
Right.
yeah, I was a mom. If somebody had the measles or the chickenpox, I said, can I bring my kids over to play? And then you'd get it. And then I'd be a little bit worried. And I was like, oh my gosh, did I do the right thing? And you guys built up your immunity.
Yep. And I remember those chickenpox parties because they itched like crazy and we had to take baths in chamomile and do all the things. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And Jasmine's only got about 30 more minutes to be with us. So anyway, I guess we can move on from memory lane.
That's why we prioritize our health, is because we have whoever voted for whoever is fine. I never take anybody's voting personally. That's why I said I knew we weren't going to get political in here, but I was just saying that's something that's important, which is health, right? Biohacking, not putting poison into our body. And I was just explaining that was a priority to me. And that was a big, for me, voting reason, because of how sacred I hold my body, was more important to me than any other, political reason to not vote in a certain way. But it is very, very important to me to look young, feel good, optimize my body. And we have the information because of, like you said, you used to have to go and look it up in a book somewhere if you had the initiative to. And now you can literally search the internet or even use AI to find a million different ways that blueberries can, help your digestion. And so there's so many things that you used to have to painstakingly spend days, weeks, months, years learning, that you can have at your fingertips to make sure that you do the best thing for your body. So that's my generation is extremely obsessed with health.
So Traveling Fool says chickenpox parties were fun.
Yeah, all right. Fun sitting in the itch nightmare for 2 weeks.
Yeah. The parties were fun, but the chickenpox wasn't.
Speaking of biohacking, so I'm trying this that I just got from the store, and it has B6, B12, biotin, L-theanine, L-theanine, 0% sugar, and green tea instead of guarana. So this is just a perfect example of a $3 or $4 can of biohacking that we'll choose over a Coke.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let's finish up food and lifestyle choices with, do you prefer cooking at home, dining out, or utilizing delivery services?
All three.
All three. Okay.
Yeah, we have, when I'm busy or when I have people over and we're hungry, we'll DoorDash, we'll Uber. No problem. We have no problem with that. It's easy. It's nice. But we love to cook. It's just the time to cook we don't always have. We're busy. So when we do have the opportunity to cook, we do it and we're good at it. And then the going out is that experience thing that you're talking about. You know, what do you spend money on? We spend money on fine dining. We spend money on going out because we're not living in homes or whatever anymore, you know, like we live in apartments. We want to get out, you know, we want to go. And that's also how we socialize these days. Cause going out to a restaurant, going out to a bar, going out is the way that you get to, I have some liquid death in my fridge. Actually, that's funny. So going out to eat and things like that, these experiences, are very important to us. And there's so much good food out there, so many good, you know, experiences that we attribute to going out that we do all three.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So on politics and social issues, I know traditionally people tend to think in a bipartisan way. Either people are liberal or conservative. And so I was going to ask, which do you identify more with, liberal or conservative? And you have already brought up a very important point, that the whole reason you voted Republican wasn't because you believed in Republicans, but because you believed in the issue that RFK Jr.
Yes.
You know,
I consider myself a libertarian. I consider myself a libertarian. I don't consider myself a liberal, a Democrat, a Republican. I used to consider myself an independent, but I feel like the independent party got weak, you know, like they're, like RFK was going to be running as an independent. So based on the political system and how it's set up, we're kind of forced to have to vote Democrat and Republican, and everyone hates it. Nobody likes it. Everyone wants to be able to vote for who they want to vote for. And they want good people to run. And when the establishment's in control of who's running, you know, we're all kind of just stuck voting. There's this great South Park episode, which my generation, you know, got exposed to. And there's this South Park episode called Giant Douche and Turd Sandwich. So there's literally like a giant douche, like a female douche that was running for president, and then a turd sandwich, and they were both running, and people are like going to have to vote between a douche and a turd sandwich. And it's just like a perfect like illustration of nobody wants this, you know, nobody wants what we're getting offered, but the people who would be good for the country would never actually get the opportunity to run on that platform because the party system locks them out. So, and the people who know what it would take you have to be a ruthless sociopath to make it in politics to that level. And unfortunately, you know, the best thing that you can do is just be involved in local politics. So that way, hopefully stuff that happens in your town, you can affect. And then, you know, nationally, you just kind of go with the flow and you know, do your best, because there's almost nothing you can do to control what happens nationally at your own independent level. Yeah.
So, I've got a couple more things I want to make sure we get to before we run out of time. So to wrap up this one, what is going on with the social justice warrior and the woke culture?
What's going on? I don't know what kind of a question that is.
I mean, it seems like it's very much part of the millennial age. and maybe going into Gen Z now as well, but it started with the millennials.
No. I
No.
think what happened with millennials is like we marched against Monsanto. We, showed up against the war in Iraq, but when it comes to social justice warriors, that's not our generation. That's a generation who doesn't understand what's really happening. So anyone who's in Black Lives Matter or Me Too or all of these movements that are happening, they're not people in my generation that are out there on the streets, or showing up and protesting. I mean, there are people who are in your generation who are manipulating people who are susceptible in the lower generations, but millennials don't buy into that. Millennials see what it really is, and it's manipulation, and it's scare tactics, and it's a way to control, because when you divide and conquer. So, and there's also, a lot of us millennials consider ourselves woke, but woke with the different term, which is red pilled. So we consider ourselves red pilled because we know we took the pill, we're out of the matrix. We see what you're doing, and you're not going to, get in our heads. And the woke culture is the opposite. They're so in the matrix that whatever they're supposed to be outraged about, they'll be outraged about it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas people who are truly woke, who are red pilled, see, oh, you're wanting me to protest BLM because you are passing a vaccine mandate on the same day and don't want us to watch the news about that. So you're creating this outrage, woke, trans issue or this issue or racist issue. My generation is not racist. We play football with Chinese, Black, Muslim, like we don't care. And it's the older generations who are racist, who are manipulating the younger generations into being racist because they can't manipulate us. And I think it's our generation is probably one of the few generations who don't buy into the outrage, because I have plenty of group threads of people who I share certain content with, and the red pill content of what do they think they're doing with this, drag queen story time, for example, right? They want us to be outraged about drag queens and trans issues. We have plenty of friends who are gay and trans, and we love them. But what they're trying to make it into is this trans against everybody thing. And it's like they're taking a 1% and making it into a huge issue, which doesn't actually exist. So yeah, hating everybody equally is exactly the millennial mindset. So the media is poaching these woke social justice warriors they're baiting them into these fights that we are not participating in. We are not going to hate our gay drag queen friends, but we are going to stand up against trying to chop off our children's genitals. So there is this, we're not playing the game that they want us to play, but the younger generation, unfortunately, is.
Okay. So I want to move on, but just to answer Robert, just kind of like a short yes or no on Trump. How do you feel about Trump?
I don't care.
Don't care. Okay, perfect. So
I don't watch the news. That's another thing that my generation doesn't do. We don't watch the news. So whatever you think because what the news is telling you, we're not buying it. We're looking at big picture. How is something affecting our lives daily? Those type of things. And we're not watching one news stream. We're not just watching CNN for our news because we know CNN is going to tell us what CNN wants us to know. We're listening to independent news streams, that are reporting without a narrative. And if you're not doing that, then whatever information you think you know, I don't care, like, because it's not real, like Fox is going to tell you what Fox wants you to know and going to outrage you against, Biden and against this and that. And then MSNBC is going to outrage you against Trump. And I don't buy it. I don't participate in that. So any kind of information that I get is usually from independent news sources, if any.
So that's a perfect segue into the last topic, which is like transhumanism and technology. And I'm going to assume that you know what that means. So with science and maybe even technocracy moving in that direction, how do you feel about that? Is that something you embrace, or
I don't
something
understand the question. What?
Transhumanism, like linking up our brains to a computer.
Is that something? Is that a thing? Is that happening?
Oh yeah, Neuralink, and there's several other companies. So there's a push towards, and I think that's why, like, even movies like Avatar are conditioning the younger generations to be hooked up to computers, and and of course they're always talking about the health things, like somebody who has a physical disability and providing more than just a prosthetic, providing a more of a bionic man kind of thing, that's becoming a reality. So do you want to become part of the machine?
No millennial. We all grew up with Terminator. So no millennials want that. But I do think that a lot of people in my generation have let the new world order get too much from us. We've gotten a little bit too compliant. We all just say yes to the agreement on the iPhone for whatever app we're downloading, and we're lazy. I think in not in work ethic, but I think we're lazy in wanting everything to be convenient. So I think that's where we don't put up a big enough fight against technology integrating into our lives. But I do know plenty of people in my generation who won't use earbuds because, the potential frequency harms, and, anyone who's biohacking, because like your friend said, there are people my age who don't care and are just eating whatever fast food that they want. Oh yeah. So Darth Vader. So I got you.
Oh my goodness. Is that a Death Star or something?
It's a Sith Republic tattoo and a Jedi Republic tattoo. So the Sith and Jedi Republic, they have to be balanced, good and evil. But I think that like my friend who I'm actually going to go see for lunch today, she said something like, the robots are taking over, we have to stop, because I said something about like ask AI, and she goes, no, we can't ask AI because AI is gonna take over, and we're gonna so a lot of people my age are terrified of technology taking over, but also don't resist it enough to stop it from happening. So I think that there's like this resistance but slow acclimation that's inevitable. We're not embracing it, we're not running towards it, but we know that it's going to happen because we've seen the movies and we're like, shit, let's just hold out for as long as we can. My generation's the one that'll have the oldest iPhone possible until we have to get a new one, whereas the younger generations are just, what's next? Oh, give me this new technology. We're like, if we have to, okay.
Yeah. And as a Gen Xer myself, my solution was to move to Cambodia.
Yeah.
Where people know, because of the genocide that happened, they had zero technology, and people alive today know what it's like to live without any technology. So if there was some kind of solar flares or whatever, or a terrorist attack that knocks out the technology, I feel good being here in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still modern things. There's modern things here. They've enabled them to do a technology leap,
Mm-hmm.
and so they've really. I mean, like the digital stuff here is just going so fast. We use our phones to pay for everything by scanning QR codes.
Yeah. So do you
Yeah.
have one last question for me? Because I have a 12
We do.
o'clock. Yeah.
The very last question is man buns. What the heck? That was not GenX. That came in with millennials.
I don't know anybody that has a man bun.
Oh, well, that's good. But the man bun, Starbucks kind of thing, that is totally a stereotype of millennials.
Well, Starbucks, absolutely. Everybody has a Starbucks app on their phone. Starbucks has... I remember being a kid and going and getting Frappuccinos in high school from Starbucks. Like, we got addicted to Starbucks very long ago. And, yeah, get the rotary phone. Yeah, definitely. But just make sure that it's hardlined and not connected to your VoIP, because it's not actually a real hardline if it's VoIP. So if you're connecting it to your Spectrum account, not going to work. And nobody hardlines anymore. You have to pay either. There's like only 2 utility companies that still hardline. So if your power goes out, buddy, so was your phone, rotary or not. So that's one thing that most people don't really think about. They think, I have a landline. No, you don't. And not if it's through Spectrum, you don't, because that's a VoIP. It's a voice over IP. It's not hardlined unless you plug it into the wall in that jack that is in your house. You do not have a hard line, and if your power goes down, you do not have a phone.
Yeah. All right. So I'm done. Any last thoughts from you? How can people find your wine glasses?
You can go to wineglassnecklace.com. You can also search Instagram for Wineglass Necklace, or Facebook for the older generation, Wineglass Necklace. And then also, if you are in need of bookkeeping, I also have a bookkeeping company, because us millennials hustle. We're not lazy. We work 60, 70 hours a week, or at least I do. So my bookkeeping is JCA Professional Business Services. You can find me on Instagram, JCA_Tax Shack. So that's, or you can just reach out to me, through your channel if you're interested in bookkeeping. But yeah, that's how you reach me, and that's what I'm up to most of the time, is just living my life, not worrying about social justice platforms, and I'm just trying to make as much money as I can to pay down that
debt. Well, good. Thank you so much. I always end my shows reminding people that love transcends time and space. So wherever and whenever you're listening or watching, I love you. So I love you, Jasmine. I love all of you in the chat, and I love anybody that watches later.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Love you all too. Thanks for your time.
All right. So for everybody, I will catch you later.